Hey, it's Rick, and this is where we're going to be talking about hackers, MongoDB, Bitcoin, and how to actually go about securing and maintaining your MongoDB database. Alright, let's go ahead and get into it. Before we actually get started with this, I actually did a video on this back in 2016, early January, so a little over a year ago. And the video that I did was how to set up access to MongoDB in production from local clients. Now, if you have not watched that video or if you have not read that blog post, head over to codewithintent.com/how to set up MongoDB, or there's a link below this video which will link you over to the blog post. But in that blog post, I went ahead and talked about something very specific. I went ahead and showed you how you can actually connect to MongoDB from an external client and set up the proper configurations for you to be able to actually access the MongoDB instance behind a firewall. That's usually how you would access it. So if you have MongoDB in production, usually it's behind a firewall. You want to go ahead and access that MongoDB instance through port 27017. And I went ahead and showed you how to actually secure this with IP tables and how to actually configure an actual external client to connect back to MongoDB. And I went ahead and talked all about that. And I went ahead and gave you the steps of how to actually accomplish this. And I covered something very specific in that video, which was security and how I'm not a security expert. Same thing with this video here. We're going to be talking about how to secure MongoDB. Again, I'm not a security expert. I don't want you to be actually taking some of the things that I'm going to be advising you here as hardcore rules. I'm giving you just a small idea and general concepts for you to understand. So when you actually go out and secure MongoDB, NoSQL databases like Redis, again, same concepts, but you want to apply it specifically to the database you're being talking about. So I'm going to be here specifically talking about MongoDB, but I want to go ahead and review the couple things that I did on the actual blog post. And I went and talked about the IP tables command and setting up the access to port 27017 and how to actually set that up. And I also went ahead and talked about a couple things. I talked about the MongoDB conf file. So if you're not familiar with the conf file, I would definitely recommend you to actually look at the conf file and see it there. You want to actually enable auth, and you want to enable disable HTTP interface, and you want to enable proper user authentication. Now, I actually went very explicitly there and actually did not talk about how to enable MongoDB user authentication. Here's the reason why I didn't go too much details into that in that blog post when I wrote this over a year ago. Is because the documentation for MongoDB, it's actually kind of hard to make sense of. And specifically when you're writing for an actual blog post that's going to be online for however many years, it kind of gets outdated and people are following this tutorial, they say it's not working. So this is why I just pretty much wrote create user authentication with MongoDB. So whatever version of MongoDB, you have to do it there. This blog post was back in 2016, and actually go ahead and talk about it extensively of how you should be thinking about security from a security point of view, not just spitting up instances of MongoDB and just running your application with no credentials. I talk about this in way more detail in the course that I teach on how to become a full stack developer with the mean stack, and I actually even give different examples of security there with different clients accessing the database. Now I want to go ahead and refer you to a question that I answered on Stack Overflow, and the question that I answered was how to set up mongo.conf bind_IP with multiple IP addresses. And in that answer, my answer got the most downvoted votes, which was by -4. People actually hated my answer. I'm not sure why, because it's actually the correct answer. But here's the deal. Just because it's the correct answer doesn't mean that people are going to actually do what you say. Here is my answer to the question, which was set up a remote machine and block all connections to port 27017. Enable remote machine to only accept connections from local machine. Set up credentials with MongoDB and connect client using those credentials. That's what I went ahead and answered on the actual question, and that got the most downvoted because, again, it's hard, it's difficult. You got to look at the documentation, you got to see what's actually being pulled in from the actual application. What are the credentials? How do you set up credentials in MongoDB? All of that. I didn't say the commands or anything of that nature. I want to make it very explicit here to pay close attention to all these steps, because I'm going to be walking you through all the steps here. But remember, just because the steps are lengthy in time, that doesn't mean you have to be lazy and not do them. You have to be very conscious of your time and use your time the most effectively that you can, so you can actually get all these checkboxes checked and have a secure instance of MongoDB. I'm creating these videos here specifically because one of my clients actually reached out to me that their users were having trouble accessing a application that I was a part of building a couple years ago. They were getting some sort of auth issues when they were trying to log in, that they were not able to log in. So they went ahead and provided me access to the server. I logged into the server, started doing a little bit of research, and I went into the database and I saw a table there called db dropped send BTC to an address. And I went ahead and did a find on that command on the actual query, and that returned me an ID, an email, and a note. And the note, here's what the note read. The note read, you have been hacked. Send 0.3 Bitcoin to Bitcoin address and email mongodb protonmail.ch with your server IP to recover your database. Then it gives you a link to how to buy Bitcoins. You can see this hacker is requesting some money. And it's hilarious because you're like, what? Hacker needs money? You know, hackers got bills to pay too. This hacker is actually requesting some money, and is actually requesting some money in Bitcoin. Now, right now, the exchange rate for actual Bitcoins is fluctuating, but right now, 0.3 Bitcoins is roughly about $300 US. It's a pretty good decent amount of money. So what I did here is actually got that Bitcoin address, and I went on the blockchain. So here's a little quick tip. I went on the blockchain and I went ahead and checked to see how much money is on the actual wallet, how much actually has received, or what's the current balance on the actual wallet, which you can check with the blockchain. So I plugged in the address, and the wallet right now has 0 Bitcoin. Here that this Bitcoin doesn't have any money. And the reason for this is because this vulnerability with MongoDB is actually pretty common, because there's up to version 2.6. All of the instances of MongoDB didn't come with the actual loopback that was back into a local machine. So instead of binding to 127.0.0.1, which is the home loopback, it was looping to 0.0.0.0, which is just any IP address can bind to the MongoDB shell. If any client can bind into the MongoDB shell, that means that the MongoDB is essentially open for anybody to connect into the database. You check if your MongoDB instance is vulnerable. So the way you can actually check if your MongoDB instance is vulnerable is if you simply install MongoDB on your local machine. So you can do this with brew command, you can do this with the sudo apt-get command, or you can do this with binaries from the website. Again, I have complete videos on how to install MongoDB, but you need MongoDB installed in order for you to be able to check if MongoDB is actually accessible on a remote machine. The way you actually do it is by simply running this command, which is mongo --host, and then the IP address of the host that you actually want to go ahead and test. Once you actually do go ahead and test that, and if that command drops you into the instance of the MongoDB shell, then you have a vulnerable MongoDB instance. So you want to make sure if you are vulnerable, you want to do a couple things. You want to get up through this entire video and actually secure your MongoDB instance, and make sure that once you actually do secure, you want to go ahead and test it again to make sure all of the settings that you actually run through are actually in place. Let's say you do find out that MongoDB is vulnerable. What do you do? Well, how do you even know it's been hacked, right? Well, you want to check and see if it's been hacked. How are you going to check if it's been hacked? Well, you're going to have to check the log files. Yes, I know those boring files you hate to look at. You want to go ahead and check the log files and see for any activity that's been happening to the database. And you can access the log file simply by going to var log mongodb log. This might be different depending on the version of Linux you're in, but it's typically in the log folder. Once you actually open up that file, so you can open up the file with Vim or Less or whatever your favorite text editor is, and if you look within that file and you search within the file and you see something along the lines of dropped or allocating or deleting, whatever a keyword with deleting and removing, you want to pay close attention to those entries. And if you see something along those lines, more than likely those databases have been dropped. If you've been hacked, what do you do now? Well, depending on where this instance of the database is actually relying on, you actually might have to open up an actual report with your organization. If you have a bigger organization, there's something called an incident report, and you actually want to open up one of these reports because depending on what data was actually lost, you might have to open a police report or talk to your legal department. Depending on the data that was actually lost, there is some fine lines there as far as who needs to get involved, because again, at this point, it might be a criminal activity that has happened within your data. And depending on what type of data was actually stored in the database, this can be a big problem. So you want to make sure that the right people are aware of this problem, and there might be even an actual PR document that has to go out to all the users of your application if your data has been breached. I'm not going to go too much into it, but more than likely your organization has a process of how to actually go about a data breach. So that's pretty much at that point. If you've been hacked, you got to make sure you have the right procedures and the right processes in place in order for you to be able to contain that problem. Let's say you did get hacked, your data's lost, should you pay the 0.3 Bitcoin? And the answer is absolutely not. You do not want to pay any sort of extortion money. You want to make it explicit you're not going to pay any money. So this is what you got to do. If you have backups, so this is really important. If you have a backup, if you don't have a backup, I'm sorry, you're out of luck. Don't pay the money. Your data's lost. Pretty much follow the right paperwork and move on with life. But if you do have a backup, this is what you're going to want to do. You want to go ahead and instantiate an instance of that backup with a different IP address. And make sure the IP address that you run the instance in is a private network. So that new instance is not accessible through the internet. Because here's the deal. Once your server gets infiltrated by one of these hackers, they're going to grab your IP address and they're going to be constantly pinging back on that server. I'm pretty sure they have a script. I mean, I could write the script. It's not difficult. It's pretty easy to do. And you want that script is going to be constantly monitoring your server. So you want to go ahead and pull up a different instance of the same machine that has not been infected. So you want to make sure you pay close attention to the date, instantiate a new instance of the virtual machine, of the backup that you have. And on the instance, you want to have the IP address to be on a private network. And once it's in a private network, you can actually start the process of securing the instance of MongoDB. Unless you get to that point, you won't be able to follow the next things that I'm going to talk about if you don't have a MongoDB instance in that state. So how exactly do you secure MongoDB in production? So how do you secure MongoDB in production? Now, the easiest way to secure MongoDB in production is by starting with what version of MongoDB are you running. You can do this with the command line. Log into the server, run the command mongo -- version. This is going to go ahead and tell you the version of the MongoDB that you're actually running. Knowing the version of MongoDB is going to be very important for the next steps, because if you don't know the version of MongoDB, of pretty much all the steps that I'm going to show you is going to be irrelevant. So it's really important that you understand and know what version of MongoDB you have, because depending on what version of MongoDB you have, that's the documentation you can actually be reading for. So if you have 2.6, 3.0, 3.1, 3.2, whatever version of MongoDB, make sure that you have the correct one, because if you're looking at the docs for a different version of MongoDB, the commands are not going to work. You're going to have undefined functions. So it's really important that you look at the right versions of MongoDB. Once you actually find out the MongoDB version, you have two different options here. You can either update the version of MongoDB or keep the current version and secure it. I'm actually going to recommend you to update the version of MongoDB to the latest version and actually run everything through that version. If you have a large data set and you can't update, there's some sort of migration or your application is reliant on a certain version of MongoDB, you're going to want to go ahead and secure your current version. That will also work. But if you do decide to update MongoDB, you can do this with just two simple commands: sudo apt-get update, sudo apt-get install MongoDB -org. You can go ahead and install this on a Linux server. Those usually will work. But if you're running a different version of Linux, then you're going to have to probably hop over and get the binaries and install them manually. It's not that hard. There's a video here, I believe, on my channel, which you can go ahead and watch. Once you actually decide what version of MongoDB you're working with, you're going to want to head over to the security reference at the MongoDB website. There's a link below this video. Heads over to my blog. There's a link there that takes you over to the security reference. In the security reference, you want to go ahead and select from the drop down. You want to select the current version of MongoDB that you have. So, for this example, I'm actually securing MongoDB 2.6. So that's the version that I'm going to be talking about here. Now, the commands that I'm about to show you and the actual functions that we're actually be calling, they might be different for your version of MongoDB. So don't think that, oh, why isn't this working for my version? Make sure that you're actually looking at the right documentation and you're running the correct functions for those specific procedures. So it's really important on the MongoDB manual for the security reference, you're referencing the right version of MongoDB. I'm going to be working with 2.6 here, but again, you might be looking at 3.4 and it's not going to be the same function calls. Just keep that in mind. We're going to go ahead and drop into the MongoDB shell. Once we're inside the shell, we're going to go ahead and use the admin database. And the admin database is going to allow us to create a user. As you can see here, I'm going to be creating a user, and the user I'm going to be creating is going to be db_admin. And the password is going to be whatever password you go ahead and type in. Right here, I just have strong password generated, and the roles I'm going to be using is for user, admin, any database, and db admin. Now the roles are actually defined to the specific version of MongoDB. So if you want to go ahead and restrict the roles, you want to go ahead and go over to the documentation, read up about all the different possible roles that are available to you, and select the ones that are going to be correct for your application. Once you actually went ahead and created the user, gave the user some roles, you actually want to go ahead and grant the roles to the user to the specific database. This is going to be specifically for the database that you want to allow access to. So for example, let's say if you have, my DB admin user, well, he wants to be able to access database 1, database 2, and database 3. And then you want to go ahead and run the command db.grant roles to users. And then you want to go ahead and exit the shell by simply typing in exit. And then once you exit the shell, all the settings are still not in place. You're going to have to restart MongoDB. But before you actually restart the service, you want to go over to the etc mongo.conf file. And then inside that conf file, you're going to see a couple things. You want to uncomment the line auth is equal to true. You want to uncomment the line the bind IP to 127.0.0.1. And then you want to go ahead and write those changes to that file and exit out of there, and then restart MongoDB with a simple service MongoDB restart. It's important that you enable those settings there, because this is what's going to allow us to be able to actually talk to MongoDB instance and have the auth values work within the parameters they're going to pass in. Now that MongoDB has actually restarted, you want to go ahead and verify that your credentials are actually working correctly. You can do this with there's a command. You can run this command right here and then pass in the correct username and password and verify you can actually log into the MongoDB shell and access the databases that you gave that role permissions for. If you can log into the instance of MongoDB and see some data within the databases, you have successfully set up a MongoDB user with credentials and access to a database. We're almost done here. So we got our credentials set up. Now the next thing here, we'll configure our application to use those credentials. Now there is something called a connection string URI format that MongoDB actually provides for you to be able to connect with credentials to the MongoDB instance. Now you might be using Mongoose to actually connect to the MongoDB client to talk to the database back and forth. So it's very specific on how do you actually input this in the actual settings file, if you have a settings file, or if you just have a app.js file, or if you work with a different language such as Java, your configuration might be different. But the takeaway here is to look at the connection string URI format that MongoDB provides for you, and look at the format that they're actually using, and use that same format when you're actually connecting to the database. And using that correct URI format to connect to the database is going to be essential. So pretty much once you configure your Java, JavaScript, PHP application to talk back to MongoDB, you're going to want to go ahead and do the last step. Now this last step is a complete bonus here. This is for those that actually are really, needy, greedy, picky about security. You can go ahead and use the IP tables command and block all traffic to port 27017 and only allow the local loop back any other IP addresses that you want to whitelist. So if you have a external service like humongous.io, or if you want to use RoboMongo, you want to go ahead and whitelist any IP addresses that you want there. And then you want to make sure you save those IP tables and then restart your server to verify those IP tables are actually in place. Really important to test and verify that everything is working as you would expect. So make sure you test your IP configurations, make sure the IP port is actually blocked for 27017 from different addresses that you don't want to allow. Make sure the credentials are in place. Make sure you run the command that I went ahead and talked about on the beginning, which is mongo-host, to verify that there is that port is no longer accessible, so you can't just drop into the MongoDB shell. And there you have it, a secure instance of MongoDB. It's a whole lot of work just to get some security in place, and I think this is one of the reasons why there is over 40,000 instances of MongoDB right now that are vulnerable, just because simply people don't want to take the time to secure the database correctly. I'm not sure if this is because of all the steps that I talked about here. I'm not sure if this video is because it's over 20 minutes in length. I'm not really sure what the reason is there, but here's what I want you to do. If you watch the video up to this point, I delivered a lot of value here for you. I'm going to go ahead and ask you to tweet this video, and I want you to go ahead and tweet it at MongoDB. And I want to see if I can get their attention on this video and in general concepts about security, because I feel like a lot of people are not taking the time to secure MongoDB securely. This is why we have over 30,000 databases that are actually vulnerable to anybody to be able to dump the data, look at the data, whatever they want to do with the data. So I need your help. I want you to go on Stack Overflow. I want you to upvote my answer. I want you to go to the blog, write a comment below that blog post. I want you to tweet this video. I need your help. Because if we don't get the word out on how to actually go about securing MongoDB, there's still going to be 30,000 databases that are vulnerable from anybody on the internet. So it's really important that you go ahead and help me out with this. If you're new to the channel, go ahead and click the subscribe button below. So I'll go ahead and do it here for this video. Make sure if you liked it, give me a thumbs up below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and I'll catch you on the next one.